Look back at your life for a moment. You have probably played the role of the deeply reliable man. You answered every call. You sacrificed your own schedule to fit neatly into someone else's. You bled your own energy dry to ensure others were comfortable, playing by the rules of the so-called good guy. You believed, as most men do, that your endless loyalty and relentless availability would eventually be rewarded with admiration and respect. And what did it get you? Absolutely nothing. You became a ghost in your own life. The very people you bled for look right past you. Meanwhile, another man walks into the room, says half of what you say, does a fraction of what you do, and yet he commands absolute attention. It is a bitter pill to swallow. Most men spend their entire lives trying to earn their worth through absolute submission. But here is the brutal truth that society intentionally hides from you. Your endless availability is exactly why you are entirely unappreciated. Let us look at this through a lens most people never consider. This is where things get slightly dark, but entirely necessary for your awakening. Think about basic macroeconomics. What happens when a government prints an endless supply of paper money? The currency loses its purchasing power. It becomes worthless paper. This is hyperinflation. Now apply this directly to human psychology. I call this psychological inflation. Your time, your attention, and your physical presence are your currency. When you print an infinite amount of it, when you are always there, always saying yes, always eagerly waiting by your phone to be of service, you hyperinflate your own value into absolute zero. You become a worthless commodity in the marketplace of human dynamics. When something is infinitely abundant, the human brain is biologically wired to stop valuing it. We do not marvel at the air we breathe until we are drowning. This brings us to the first immutable law of human nature. You must immediately stop granting the world unlimited access to your life. Machiavelli, the absolute master of power dynamics, understood a terrifying truth about the human condition. Familiarity breeds contempt. Roll that phrase around in your mind for a second. The more people see you, the more they can predict your every move, the more accessible you are, the less they respect you. It is not because people are inherently evil or malicious. It is simply because human nature despises the easily obtainable. When you are always available, you send a subconscious, high-definition broadcast to the world that your time has no inherent worth. You are telling them that your own goals, your own peace, and your own life are strictly secondary to whatever trivial whim they happen to have. If you treat yourself like a doormat, you cannot be surprised when people wipe their boots on you. But why do you do this? Why do so many ambitious, capable men fall into this pathetic trap? Carl Jung, the legendary psychoanalyst, would point directly to your shadow. Deep down, the compulsive need to be available is not rooted in kindness or morality. It is rooted in fear. The psychological archetype of the nice guy is fundamentally a man who is terrified of conflict, terrified of abandonment, and deeply insecure about his own baseline worth. He attempts to buy love, validation, and respect through constant, covert submission. But the human subconscious is highly attuned to weakness. People can smell it on you. They know when your generosity is actually a disguised plea for approval. True respect demands a hint of danger. It requires the integration of your shadow. You must be capable of saying no. You must possess the capacity for cold, calculated absence. A man who cannot walk away has no leverage, and a man with no leverage will always be a slave to the demands of others. Imagine two doors. One is made of cheap, rotting wood, permanently wedged open, leading to a public waiting room. Anyone can walk in, track mud on the floor, and leave without a word of gratitude. The second door is solid, heavy iron. It is locked. It only opens for those who have earned the key, and even then, only at the owner's strict discretion. Which room holds more value? Which space demands reverence upon entry? You have been operating as the wooden door, desperately hoping someone will eventually appreciate the free shelter. But respect is never given to the free shelter. It is reserved for the fortress. You must rebuild your psychological architecture. You must become the iron door. When your attention is no longer guaranteed, it instantly transforms into a premium asset. People begin to realize that your presence is a hard-won privilege, not a given right. This is not about playing petty, manipulative games. It is not about ignoring people just to stroke your own fragile ego. That is what weak men do when they try to mimic power. This is about a fundamental tectonic shift in your internal reality. You must recognize that every single day you are alive, your life force is draining. You only have a finite number of heartbeats on this earth. Every time you casually hand over an hour of your life to someone who does not respect it, you are willingly bleeding out. The men who are deeply revered in this world understand the finite nature of their existence. They guard their energy like a dragon guards gold. And because they fiercely protect their own time, the rest of the world instinctively falls in line and protects it too. People learn exactly how to treat you by observing how you treat yourself. If you do not worship your own time, they will happily burn it for warmth. But simply cutting off access is only the foundation. Once you lock that iron door, you must understand what to do with the space you have created behind it. Because true psychological power is not just about being physically absent, but about the terrifying magnetic force of what you choose to keep hidden. Once you build that iron door, you are confronted with a new challenge. What do you let the world see? This brings us to the second pillar of unshakable value. You must learn to weaponize the power of mystery. We live in an era that worships radical transparency. You are told by modern culture that being vulnerable, sharing your every passing thought, and loudly broadcasting your next move is the highest form of authenticity. What a fatal lie. The moment you explain yourself completely, you strip away the very friction that creates human fascination. The more you talk about your plans, the less interesting you become. It sounds entirely counterintuitive, doesn't it? But you must realize that human beings are biologically driven to decode the unknown. We are captivated by the shadows, not the blinding light of day. When you open your mind and pour out every detail of your life, you remove the curiosity that forces people to pay attention to you. Think about the architecture of a brilliant film or a novel that you cannot put down. Is it the complete, absolute knowledge of every plot point in the first 5 minutes that keeps you watching? No. It is the unanswered questions. It is the tension of the unknown. Yet most men destroy their own tension daily. The moment they conceive a new goal, they run to tell their friends. The moment they experience a minor victory, they desperately post it online for a fleeting hit of validation. By revealing all your cards, you surrender your leverage. In the brutal courts of Renaissance Italy, Machiavelli observed a fundamental rule of survival and power. The courtier who reveals his full hand is quickly categorized, neutralized, and controlled. But the man who masters the law of the unsaid remains a formidable force. People naturally fear and respect what they cannot fully categorize. When you leave blank spaces in your narrative, The human mind cannot help but fill those spaces with its own projections, usually magnifying your importance and power. Most people stop here. They think simply being quiet is enough to simulate power. But you don't. You understand that a hollow silence is eventually exposed as emptiness. The enigma you project must be anchored to something unbreakable. This is where you must establish ruthless, uncompromising standards. Have you ever encountered a man who commanded absolute respect without ever raising his voice? A man who didn't need to aggressively assert his dominance, yet the entire room naturally adjusted to his frequency. That man possesses something that 99% of society severely lacks: a definitive, non-negotiable set of standards. He knows exactly where he stands, and because he knows it with absolute certainty, the rest of the world instantly recognizes it. The quickest way to destroy your own value is to make your limits a moving target. One week you allow a friend or a partner to cross a line of disrespect, brushing it off with a forced smile. The next week they cross the exact same line, and you explode in emotional rage. What does this communicate? It screams weakness. It tells the world that you have no core principles, only fluctuating moods. Confusion is the ultimate solvent of respect. Human nature is fundamentally opportunistic. People will constantly, subconsciously test your perimeter to see exactly what they can get away with. If there are no concrete consequences, they will push further. Weak boundaries are an invitation for exploitation. To counter this, you must adopt the mindset of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He wrote extensively about the concept of the inner citadel, an impenetrable fortress of the mind. As a Stoic, Aurelius understood a cold, hard truth. You have zero control over the barbarians at the gates. You cannot control the disrespect, the manipulation, or the chaotic behavior of the people around you. But you possess absolute dictatorial dominion over what you allow to enter your citadel. Standards are not tools to control other people. That is the delusion of a tyrant. Standards are the tools you use to govern yourself. They are the strict criteria for what you will accept into your reality and what you will decisively cut out. When a man with genuine standards encounters disrespect, he does not throw a tantrum. He does not engage in petty emotional arguments to prove his point. His actions do the communicating. If a boundary is breached, he calmly and coldly removes his presence. The drawbridge is raised, the iron door is shut. It is simple, clear, and surgically consistent. And that is why it is so profoundly intimidating. This level of self-control projects a massive aura of self-respect. It signals to the world that you are fully prepared to walk away from anyone and anything that threatens your peace or compromises your values. You are no longer abandoning your own dignity just to keep the peace. You are no longer tolerating parasitic behavior just to avoid being alone. When the world realizes that you would rather stand entirely alone in your citadel than compromise your standards for the sake of cheap company, their perception of you undergoes a violent shift. You transition from a participant in their games to a judge of their character. Your confidence is no longer a fragile mask you wear in public. It becomes a dense, gravitational field that forces others to recalibrate their behavior when they enter your orbit. But creating this field requires more than just internal philosophy. The true test of your standards and your mystery happens the moment you open your mouth, which forces us to examine the terrifying gravity of how you choose to project your voice into the world. Once your standards are locked into place and the fortress is built, a dangerous transmutation occurs. People begin to watch you closely. They begin to wait for you to speak. And this is exactly where the vast majority of men sabotage their own power. They mistakenly believe that influence requires total domination of the sound waves. They think being valued means filling every silence, explaining every detail, and jumping into every conversation just to prove they belong in the room. But have you ever noticed the loudest man in the group is rarely the one who holds the actual power? In fact, the more a man talks, the faster his words blend into the background noise of everyday life. When something is everywhere, it becomes ordinary. When your voice is constantly ringing in people's ears, they mentally mute you. Let me reveal a psychological mechanism that most people do not know. Every time you open your mouth to talk about yourself, your brain releases a tiny hit of dopamine. Talking feels good. It gives you a cheap biological high and a false sense of progress. Weak men are addicted to this high. They talk to convince themselves that they exist. They chatter to alleviate their crushing anxiety, frantically attempting to control how others perceive them. But a dangerous man operates on an entirely different frequency. He understands the lethal power of the pregnant pause. He does not speak to feel productive. He observes to gather tactical intelligence. While the weak man is busy planning his next sentence, the silent observer is scanning the room. He is identifying insecurities, decoding hidden agendas, and mapping out the true power dynamics at play. Because he listens, he gathers the ammunition that everyone else is carelessly dropping on the floor. When this man finally decides to speak, the effect is deafening. The entire room leans in. Why? Because his words are incredibly scarce, which instantly makes them highly valuable. He does not waste 20 sentences when 3 precise words will sever the target. He does not explain his thought process. He simply delivers the verdict. Machiavelli keenly observed this dynamic when he stated that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. Wise men do not react emotionally to the noise around them. They evaluate, they calculate, and they strike with absolute precision. This is the difference between speaking to demand attention and speaking to inflict impact. If you want to command deep, unwavering respect, you must learn the brutal discipline of the tongue. Every single word you allow to leave your mouth must serve a definitive purpose, or it should not be spoken at all. But discipline in communication only sets the stage. Words, no matter how heavy or calculated, are completely meaningless if they are not anchored to physical reality. This brings us from the economy of words to the absolute gravity of action. You must completely eradicate the confusion between being available and being reliable. Society has tricked you into thinking they are the same thing. They are completely opposite forces. Available means you are always physically there, a ubiquitous resource that anyone can tap into at any time. Reliable means that when the pressure is absolute, when the stakes are critical, and when you finally give your word, the outcome is guaranteed. One creates a stale familiarity, the other forges ironclad trust. Let us look at 2 distinct archetypes. First is the flapping mouth. This man wants to be loved by everyone, so he agrees to everything. He makes grand promises, enthusiastically commits to a dozen projects, and thrives on the immediate validation of saying yes. But when the time comes to execute, he crumbles. He has an endless supply of excuses. Every time he fails to deliver, the invisible currency of his reputation plummets. Then you have the silent architect. This man is notoriously difficult to get a commitment from. He rejects most requests. He says no without a hint of apology. But on the rare occasion, he looks you in the eye and says, "It will be done." You can sleep soundly, knowing it is already a fact of reality. Who do you think commands the highest premium in life? Who do you think the elite actively seek out? Most people misunderstand reliability. They think it is just about being a good worker or a nice guy. It is not. True reliability is a dark, profound form of psychological dominance. Think about it. In a chaotic world where everyone is flaking, lying, and breaking under pressure, the man who consistently bends reality to match his words becomes a god among men. He provides certainty in a landscape of endless doubt. When your actions consistently echo your minimal words, you prove that you have total mastery over yourself and your environment. People naturally submit to reality. If your word is reality, people will naturally submit to you. But being a man of heavy words and flawless execution has a side effect. As your gravitational pull increases, the demand for your presence will skyrocket. This forces you to make a critical decision about how you occupy space, which brings us directly to the terrifying power of selective absence. Imagine a king who commands an absolute empire. If he remains in his high castle, obscured behind layers of royal guards and heavy iron gates, the populace projects divine authority onto him. They whisper about his unimaginable power. They revere his rare, calculated appearances. But what happens if that same king decides to walk the muddy streets every single day? What happens when he drinks in the common taverns, shakes hands with every passing merchant, and forces his presence into every ordinary conversation? The mystique shatters instantly. Within weeks, the awe evaporates entirely. He is no longer a divine ruler. He is just another man wearing a piece of metal on his head. He has effectively downgraded himself to a peasant. This is the tragic flaw of the modern man. You have been brainwashed to believe that constant visibility equals value. You think that if you are not seen at every gathering, in every group chat, or at every trivial social event, you will cease to exist. You suffer from the absolute terror of being forgotten. But here is a dark psychological truth that most people will never understand. Human beings are biologically incapable of valuing what is always in front of their faces. We are hunters by nature. We place the highest premium on the prey that is elusive, on the resources that require immense effort to obtain. When you constantly force your presence into every room, you trigger the psychological mechanism of fatigue. You become background noise. Machiavelli recognized this brutal aspect of the human animal centuries ago. He observed that men only truly value what they must bleed and sweat to acquire. When your attention and your physical presence are handed out like free pamphlets on a street corner, they are thrown into the trash just as quickly. You must master the art of the strategic withdrawal. This does not mean you vanish into the woods to play manipulative games. Pouting in a corner in silence just to see if anyone notices your absence is the behavior of a petulant child. Strategic withdrawal is entirely different. It happens naturally when your life becomes anchored in a massive, all-consuming purpose. A man with a terrifying ambition simply does not have the bandwidth to entertain every trivial invitation. He is too busy building his empire to care about the fleeting gossip of peasants. When your absence is a direct byproduct of your relentless, obsessive grind, people can feel the difference. They realize you are not hiding. You are ascending. And when you finally do descend from your work to make an appearance, Your presence carries the immense weight of an exclusive event. You are no longer just a participant in their reality. You are the guest of honor. But scarcity of presence is only half of the equation. If you withdraw, but you are utterly unremarkable, people will simply forget you without a second thought. You must pair your physical absence with something far more lethal. You must become impossible to replace. Think about the marketplace of human relationships. If your only defining traits are that you are nice, loyal, and easy to get along with, you are in extreme danger. These are not unique qualities. These are the baseline requirements for a domesticated pet. If this is all you offer, you are a commodity. And in the brutal, unforgiving reality of human dynamics, commodities are effortlessly swapped out the moment a newer, shinier version walks into the room. If you blend into the crowd, you will be replaced by the crowd. This is the exact moment most people fail, but you don't. You must engage in what Carl Jung called individuation. You must stop trying to be a carbon copy of the idealized, agreeable modern man. You must forge a psychological and skill-based moat around yourself. What is your specific knowledge? What is the unique, razor-sharp edge that you bring to a room that absolutely no one else possesses? Perhaps it is your ability to remain terrifyingly calm and analytical when everyone else is panicking. Perhaps it is your capacity to see the underlying, invisible architecture of a problem while others are distracted by surface-level symptoms. Perhaps it is a hyper-specific set of skills that you have sharpened in the dark while others were out seeking cheap dopamine. You do not demand value by asking people to recognize your worth. That is begging. You demand it by building a mind and a character that is so dense, so capable, and so uniquely powerful that replacing you becomes an absolute nightmare. When you are the only man in the room who can solve the problem, you don't need to shout to be heard. The room will naturally bow to your competence. Over time, your specific value compounds. You stop being an option and start becoming a necessity. But even this is not the final step. Most people think building this external value is the end of the game. You understand that the final, most dangerous evolution of this process happens entirely inside your own mind. You must shift from seeking external value to emanating internal gravity. And that final transmutation is what separates the men who are temporarily respected from the men who are eternally unforgettable. We have dismantled the illusions. We have constructed the iron door, weaponized the silence, and built the unreplaceable mind. But if you simply take these lessons and attempt to mimic them like an actor reading a script, you will ultimately fail. The world has an uncanny, predatory instinct for detecting a fraud. If you are just playing a game of pretend to manipulate how others see you, the mask will eventually slip, and when it does, the loss of respect will be catastrophic and permanent. The final, most dangerous evolution of this entire journey does not happen in the boardroom. It does not happen in your social conversations. It happens in the absolute dark, in the silent, unseen moments of your life when absolutely no one is watching. Most men go through their entire existence fundamentally backwards. They try to alter the external world to fix their internal emptiness. They beg for inclusion. They adjust their personalities to match whatever group they happen to be standing in. They constantly check the temperature of the room to see if they are approved of. And in this endless, exhausting pursuit of external validation, they slowly assassinate their own souls. But true, unshakable value does not come from chasing the applause of the crowd. It is generated by how you behave when there is no audience to perform for. Consider the fundamental laws of astrophysics. A black hole does not politely ask the universe to pay attention to it. It does not demand that light bend around its edges. It simply exists with such an immense, terrifying density that the fabric of space and time has no choice but to warp around its presence. This is the exact psychological shift you must undergo. You must move from a paradigm of desperately seeking value to a state of naturally emanating gravity. When you possess true internal density, when your purpose is clear, your discipline is ironclad, and your standards are non-negotiable, you no longer need to demand respect from anyone. Your very existence makes disrespect impossible. Every single concept we have dissected today points directly back to one inescapable truth. Your external reality is nothing more than a mirror reflecting your internal self-respect. When you freely give your time away like garbage, the world treats your time like garbage. When you over-explain every tiny decision you make, your words become as light as feathers, easily blown away and ignored. When you lack a definitive, singular direction in life, people instinctively stop taking your presence seriously because you are just drifting through their reality rather than commanding your own. But the moment you start living with ruthless intention, a terrifying shift occurs. You do not even have to announce it. People will feel the change in the air the second you walk into a room. They will sense it in the deliberate, unhurried way you carry yourself. They will hear it in the heavy, measured cadence of your voice. They will notice it in the cold, calculated way you analyze situations instead of reacting to them. And slowly, the entire ecosystem of your life will begin to adjust its behavior toward you. Not because you threw a tantrum, not because you aggressively manipulated them, but because you changed your internal frequency first, and the external world had no choice but to harmonize with it. This is the great secret that the masses will never comprehend. You do not become a man of value by forcing people to perceive you differently. You become a man of value by actually becoming him. You build the internal architecture first, and once that internal structure is forged in iron, the desperation vanishes. You stop seeking permission to exist. You stop explaining your choices to people who have no authority over your life. You stop trying to prove your worth in every trivial conversation, because you no longer require the world's validation to confirm a truth you already possess in your bones. Take everything you have learned here today and embed it into your psychology. Do not use this as a superficial performance. Use it as the catalyst for your own transmutation. Lock your doors, weigh your words, guard your time. Cultivate a terrifying level of competence in the shadows, and build a mind so uniquely powerful that the world cannot afford to ignore it, yet can never quite figure it out. If you have understood the gravity of what was shared here today, if you are ready to stop being a ghost and start commanding the respect that your existence demands, go down to the comments right now and type, "I know my value." Let it be a digital contract with yourself. If this transmission shifted the way you view the dark realities of human nature, leave a like. Share this with a man who is currently bleeding himself dry for the wrong people, and subscribe to the channel. We will continue to dissect the unspoken rules of psychology, power, and absolute self-mastery. Because the ultimate truth is this: the world does not value noise, and it despises the easily obtainable. The exact moment you stop chasing your value in the eyes of others is the exact moment they will finally begin to see the terrifying value in you.